All right, everybody, we've made it. It's Friday, April 28th, 2023. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Mosheh.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And we're looking forward to sending everyone into the weekend, Jill.
That's right. Good vibes only. So corny. Ignore that. Everybody who's listening, ignore that I said that.
I like the positivity, Jill. We're in that weird time of year where it is spring, but it's still April. So if you live in the Northeast or the North, frankly, you're still wearing a jacket, still kind of dipping into the 50s and 40s. So really hoping for like spring into summer to take hold soon.
Mosh, thanks for the weather analysis. Let's get to some headlines.
It was more optimism, not analysis.
A lot of news to get to. I know I started by saying good vibes only, but when it comes to the economy, the worst of both worlds. That is how some economists are describing the current state of our economy. We'll explain as recession watch continues.
They're always predicting recession, but we'll tell you what they're saying now.
Right, we've been on recession watch for well over a year at this point. Meanwhile, Title 42 expires in a couple of weeks, and the Biden administration has rolled out a plan to help slow down what's expected to be a surge of migrants coming through the U.S.-Mexico border. We'll walk through their plan. Former VP Mike Pence spent 7 hours testifying before a grand jury investigating his former boss's role in January 6th. Iran has seized an oil tanker bound for Houston. We'll have an update from the trial where a woman is accusing former President Trump of rape. The big melt has arrived in California. Controversial talk show host Jerry Springer has passed away. We're going to look back on his career.
Jerry.
And Mosh has on this day in history.
Jill, some interesting history of Aretha Franklin's hit Respect and the backstory of that song.
And it is Friday, what we are watching, reading, and eating this weekend.
Jill, I understand you just came off of trying to make a challah.
I did, and it was one of the more stressful things I've done in a long time. So yeah, that is why I'm currently sweating at the moment.
It sounds like it might not be something you're eating this weekend, depending on how it came out.
All right, we'll discuss toward the end of the podcast. But for now, to our top story, the economy and what some analysts are now calling the worst of both worlds. Mosh, that's never good.
I can only take one bad world. I can't have two bad worlds, Jill.
Okay, so why the negativity, people? Some new numbers came out Thursday that show that the GDP, or the gross domestic product, which tracks how much the U.S. economy grew, rose just 1.1% in the first quarter. That is less than expected, and it is a slowdown from the previous quarter. At the same time, new data shows that inflation remains a big problem. What's called personal consumption expenditures. That's another index that tracks how much consumers have to spend on things. Well, that increased 4.2%, and that's also higher than expected. So we've now got this double whammy, a slowing economy, and yet inflation, or the price that we pay for everything from gas to food to housing, still quite elevated. One economist telling Bloomberg that Thursday morning's data was the worst of both worlds, with growth slowing down and inflation going up. And that puts the Fed in a difficult spot yet again, because you would expect that with the economy slowing down, that eventually prices would come down, but they are still stubbornly high.
Yeah, that's actually the goal here of the Fed. One of their goals with increasing interest rates is to slow down the economy. So not surprised the economy is slowing down and slowing down more than they thought. But at the same time, the idea is slow the economy down, start to bring prices down. And right now, inflation remains stubborn. It's not at the peak of last year, but still elevated above. They would like it to be around 2 to 3%. It remains higher than that. At the same time, Jill, we do have some good news for everybody. The job picture still remains pretty good based on the latest numbers. Unemployment numbers out Thursday were lower than expected, which means despite the headlines that we're seeing about mass layoffs at some high-profile tech companies, media companies, in general, the job market remains in pretty good shape. So the economy is slowing down, inflation's still high, jobs are good. This is not exactly out of a textbook here for economics. We're still dealing with the ramifications of the COVID shutdown, so things are still a bit out of whack here, which puts the Federal Reserve in a difficult position again. Economists are expecting that they will raise interest rates yet again, another 0.25%, at their next meeting. And that comes despite another thing that we're watching, which is the whole banking crisis. As reported yesterday, First Republic Bank is the latest bank struggling to hang on right now.
And Mosh, dare I mention recession? Technically, 2 quarters of negative growth means that we are in a recession. We're not there. The economy still grew in the last quarter, but recession is still looming. As the Associated Press put it, the government's report Thursday that the economy grew at a 1.1% annual rate last quarter signals the most anticipated recessions in recent U.S. history has yet to arrive. Many economists, though, still expect a recession to hit as soon as the current April to June quarter or soon thereafter.
Yeah, they are noticing that people are spending less. When people are spending less, given that we have a very consumer-focused economy here in the U.S., that typically portends a slowdown. And so we're going to continue to monitor things. You know, one of the things going into 2023 that we knew was it wasn't a matter of if, but when we have a recession. Now, how significant that recession is still up in the air. People hope it's a pretty light recession if we don't grow the economy in multiple quarters. One of the other factors in all of this, and this is something we discussed on yesterday's podcast, is the debt ceiling crisis. At some point this summer, we could be hitting the debt ceiling, and if there's no deal between House Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, as well as President Biden, that could send shockwaves through the economy. So that's something you can imagine the President Democrats will be stressing to Republicans, saying, can you just increase the debt ceiling here so we can pay our debt? Because we don't want to add another negative factor to this whole economic soup that we're cooking right now.
And what kind of soup is that, Moshe?
I don't know, Jill. It seems like depending on when you typically soup is pretty consistent. You put your spoon in the bowl and it tastes pretty similarly each time. Based on this economic mix, though, it feels like if you put your spoon in once, it tastes really great. If you put your spoon in on the other side, it doesn't taste very good. I don't know. Are you guys buying this metaphor? I feel like it works so far, right?
One side, you're getting egg drop soup. The other side is minestrone. You're right. It needs to be even throughout.
That's so wild. I had minestrone in my mind, and you went with minestrone. I feel like we're on a good way. This is a good preview of the rest of the podcast, folks.
All right, Mosh, now on to immigration. The Biden administration is prepping for what's expected to be a surge of migrants when the longtime policy called Title 42 ends in May. So Title 42 was this pandemic-era policy. It's set to expire on May 11th as the national COVID-19 health emergency ends. Title 42 basically let officials quickly expel migrants without processing asylum claims because of pandemic health risks. It was instituted by President Trump March of 2020, and then it was renewed several times by Biden. But now COVID's officially over. So this has been used to expel about 2.7 million asylum seekers. On Thursday, the administration said it will set up migrant processing centers in Latin America. It's been used to expel 2.7 million asylum seekers, but as I mentioned, it's set to expire. And so now the Biden administration is trying to come up with a plan. They said they're going to set up migrant processing centers in Latin America, increase deportations, and also expand legal migration pathways. Those processing centers are going to be physical locations, and that's where migrants can be screened, and then officials will determine whether or not they qualify to enter the United States legally. There are many legal avenues to enter the country, like traditional refugee resettlement. There's temporary work visas, family visa programs. The centers for now are going to be located throughout Latin America, starting with Guatemala and Colombia. And the goal here is just to reduce the number of people who are illegally crossing into the United States through our border with Mexico.
Yeah, we've been seeing a surge here for a couple of years now when it comes to record numbers across the border. It has dissipated in the past couple of months, but this was their big fear, that when Title 42 goes, that we'll see an even bigger fear, because typically word spreads through WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups among these migrants that the border is open again, that you're going to get through again. And that's something that the Biden administration is particularly concerned about, both on a policy level, but more on a political level, right? You're going to an election next year. Immigration has been a very hot issue, and it's something that they've taken a lot of heat from from Republicans. And typically you also see a surge in the spring. So US officials are telling CBS News right now, they're especially seeing an increase down in Texas's Rio Grande Valley. On Tuesday alone, Border Patrol apprehended 7,500 migrants. That is a 40% increase from March's daily average. So they're already seeing this surge. Right now they have internal projections that apparently migrant arrivals on the southern border could hit between 10 and 13,000 a day starting next month. So as I mentioned, this is a huge political liability for the president. And what's interesting here in the past couple of months is the Biden administration has been making moves that they've been getting more criticism from the left from. Progressives have been very upset with the crackdown of sorts that Biden has been doing. So they've been getting more grief from their left flank. Some progressives actually comparing Joe Biden and his policies to Donald Trump. So the U.S. intends to keep deporting Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans to Mexico. If they cross the southern border unlawfully, those deportations would be carried out under immigration law instead of Title 42 and lead deportees to be banned for 5 years. If they attempt to cross the border after being deported, they could then face criminal prosecution. Among the other things the White House has done here is they've been working to finalize a rule that would also disqualify migrants from asylum if they enter the country illegally after failing to seek humanitarian protection in a third country. Keep in mind, many of these people not coming from Mexico, they're not Mexicans coming to the U.S., they're from another country. Again, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, etc. And so the new U.S. rules would indicate that they need to seek asylum in another country before they get to the U.S. One of those countries is Mexico. And so this has been something, again, Biden has been criticized from the left on, and the right is actually saying, okay, let's see more of this.
Yeah, we have been talking about Title 42 for a really long time, and now we're less than 2 weeks from when it's going to expire. And Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas still won't call immigration at the southern border a crisis. And I think that's a very conscious decision as we head into an election season.
Yeah, one of the things they like to point to is that they want to blame some of this on the Trump administration. Of course, President Biden has now been in for more than 2 years. So Republicans would like to say that this is now on his watch. Probably part of the reason they're reluctant to call it a crisis right now, because they would own it. All right, before we get to our sponsors this week, Jill, I want to thank everyone this week who's been joining Mo News Premium. We continue to see new subscribers every day. And so we're so grateful to all of you who are helping us fix the news. The news is broken, and we're trying our best here at Mo News to take a new approach. You can head over to mo.news/premium right now to become a subscriber. There is both a monthly rate, an annual rate, and a lifetime rate if you would like. It's an opportunity to get even more content, access to a subscriber premium feed, as well as an extra private Instagram account where we're doing more content, more deep dives behind the scenes. Jill, I'm still waiting on your behind the scenes videos.
I promise I'll do them next week.
Where's the hollow video? It sounds like you in the kitchen would have been some good Instagram. It was
total mayhem. Fodder. There are videos that exist. So I will see. Maybe I'll post one.
Mayhem sounds a bit scary actually in the kitchen, but I'm glad you came out of it, and we're recording this podcast now. Keep in mind, Mo News Premium right now is $7 a month or $70 a year, where you will get 2 months free. Added benefit, if you're listening to this podcast this week alone, you can use the code MONEWSPOD, MONEWSPOD, and get an extra month free on your subscription.
Moshe, I do want to talk quickly about that phrase that we keep saying, that the news is broken, help us fix it. And I think it just speaks to what we're trying to do here at Mo News. We don't really mean the news is broken, although it kind of is. The fact that polls show most Americans don't trust the vast majority of news outlets tells you that there is a serious problem. And I think what we're trying to do is just tell it to people straight, and everyone can make up their minds on how they feel about things. But you need information. You need real information that you could trust.
Yeah, one of the things we don't want to do is freak you out. That's something that we hate about the news right now. Another thing we don't want to do is tell you how to feel about something. And another thing we don't want to do is approach just things from one angle and slanted and partisan. So we're really serious about nonpartisan, calm, context, history. And that's part of what we're doing here. And so by joining Mo News Premium, you help us sustain what we're doing right now on this podcast, on Instagram, and help us grow and add reporters and really build this an operation that takes a different approach to news coverage.
Okay, time now for the speed read. Let's start with what's being dubbed the big melt. From USA Today, the colossal amount of snow in California's mountains from a winter of ferocious storms has started to melt, and an incoming heat wave is reigniting flooding concerns across the state. One scientist from UCLA tweeting, "The big melt is now officially arriving. Flows on many rivers draining the central and southern Sierra will double or triple as temperatures rise. Some rivers will exceed flood stage. A huge snowpack from the record-smashing snowfalls could be a blessing for a region that's been plagued by drought, but experts have been warning that it is also a potential disaster if it melts all at once. The state's vast wilderness, including Yosemite and some critical agricultural communities, are at particular risk for flooding. Forecasters are less concerned about the state's coastal cities. With highs expected well above 90 degrees, near record maximum temps are expected in the San Joaquin Valley on Saturday, and it's also going to be unusually warm in the mountains as well.
Yeah, there's already water on some roadways, and meadows are beginning to fill up. I mean, with this crazy excessive snow, this was the big concern, and California doesn't have the infrastructure to cleanly take a record snowfall. I mean, even in a good year, they see flooding. Keep in mind, California is huge when it comes to agriculture. It is the top source for a number of fruits and vegetables that you see at the grocery store. Some people don't think about that when it comes to California because we know it for LA, Hollywood, San Francisco, but it is the source of so much in this country. Yosemite National Park, you mentioned it, Jill, is closed right now through midweek next week because of some of the river overflow. The concern is this hot weather coming after this record snowfall is really just going to cause a major melt there. And while shifting wet and dry years have been the norm for California since the beginning of time, really, several things have changed, including the amount of agriculture in the state. Towns have grown. And so these intense weather events, and so this back and forth between dry and flood is leading to more issues.
And if you don't live in California, the reason that all of this matters, as you mentioned, is because of all of the agriculture. And we've already been talking that inflation is really high. So this just means that the price for everything from avocados to almonds to all of the things that they grow and
strawberries, lettuce, I mean, almost everything, peaches. You know, people think like they call Georgia the peach state. Our number one source of peaches in this country is California. So unfortunately, it may mean higher prices in the grocery store in the country.
From NBC News on Thursday, writer E. Jean Carroll, who alleges in a lawsuit that Donald Trump raped her in the 1990s, was questioned by Trump's attorney. Joe Tacopina repeatedly suggested that her claim was made up. He said to her, "You were supposedly raped?" She responded, "I was raped." Carroll maintains that the attack happened while shopping with Trump at Bergdorf Goodman's back in 1995 or 1996. She said that it happened in the dressing room. She first went public with her claim more than 20 years later in 2019. Then President Trump derided it as a hoax she made up to promote sales of a book where she had made that allegation. Carroll acknowledged to the attorney that she is a longtime Democrat. And then when she first heard Trump was running for president, she said, "I was in disbelief. I felt really bad." He did ask her about a passage on the attack in an earlier draft of the book where she wrote that she was going public because she didn't like Trump's policies as president. Carroll, who's a former advice columnist, acknowledged that she thought disclosing the attack in her book, it's called What Do We Need Men For? A Modest Proposal. She said that she did think it would help sales, but said that she was wrong. In her lawsuit and on the witness stand, Carroll said she'd been inspired to come forward by a New York Times story on sexual misconduct allegations against movie producer Harvey Weinstein, which was pretty much the beginning of the Me Too movement. She told Tacopina that that was indeed the inspiration and that she believed coming forward when she did could help combat the culture of sexual violence in the country. She said that it caused me to realize staying silent does not work.
So this is the civil trial right now happening in New York. It's expected that it could go a bit into next week. Tacopina, who's Trump's attorney, you may have seen him on TV, did a lot of the questioning today, asking Carroll questions about also why she didn't scream during this 3-minute alleged attack inside a department store dressing room. Carol responded, "I'm not a screamer. I was too much in panic to scream." She went on to say, women who don't come forward, one of the reasons they don't come forward is because they're asked why they didn't scream. Some women scream, some women don't. It keeps women silent. Now, Jill, you mentioned that the attack either happened in 95 or 96. That's one of the issues Tacopina and the Trump team are stating here, saying, how does she not know the exact date of this? Just a general time frame. And then, of course, she waited more than 20 years here. But she says that she shared the attack with friends at the time, and they told her not to go public because Trump was too rich and too powerful. Another notable exchange, Jill, that came out here, Tacopina also questioned Carol about a 2017 email they got a hold of between her and her friend, in which the friend wrote, "As soon as we're both well enough to scheme, we must do our patriotic duty again." Carol responded to that email by saying, "Totally, I have something special for you when we meet." When Carol testified, she was asked about it. She said she can't recall what that email meant. Tacopina then went into it saying, "How do you recall rape details, but not this email?" And she says, "Well, I can recall a rape. I don't recall every email I ever wrote." Something to keep in mind here as we watch the proceedings. Again, this is a civil case, not a criminal case, which means the standard here for the 9-person jury is not beyond a reasonable doubt, but preponderance of the evidence. Basically, is there a 50.1% chance that Trump may have done this? And it's a much lower threshold, which makes it easier here for Carol. But there are certainly opportunities here that Trump's team is taking here to try to poke holes in this, hoping that they're not able to meet that standard, that Carol is not able to meet it.
From the Washington Post, former Vice President Mike Pence appeared Thursday before the federal grand jury convened as part of the special counsel investigation into former President Trump's efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss. The testimony is a significant development in the special counsel's probe, as Pence could provide critical insights into Trump's thinking in the days leading up to the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. The former vice president published a memoir and a Wall Street Journal opinion article detailing several of his interactions with Trump, but some details were left pretty vague. Special counsel Jack Smith's team is particularly interested in Trump's efforts to try to block the certification of the election.
So one of the reasons why this is notable, beyond what Pence might say here, is that he fought it, and so did the Trump team. But a federal judge ordered Pence to comply with the subpoena here and testify and give insight to what Trump was up to in the weeks leading up to January 6th and on that day. In his bid not to testify, Pence's team basically tried to argue that he was a legislative official on the day of January 6th because he was overseeing the counting of the electoral votes. A judge overruled that, noting that despite being the president of the Senate that day, that he still could provide insight into alleged illegal behavior by Trump. This was behind closed doors, so we don't know what was said yet as we record this on Thursday evening. And a reminder, this is one of 2 special counsel investigations into Trump. The other one that we've talked about intermittently on this podcast is the classified records special counsel investigation, both under the same special counsel, Jack Smith, but he has 2 investigations going right now.
All right, let's head overseas. From Reuters, Iran seized an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman in international waters on Thursday, according to the U.S. Navy. It is the latest in a series of seizures or attacks on commercial vessels in sensitive Gulf waters since 2019. The Navy's Mideast-based 5th Fleet identified the vessel as the Advantage Suite. It had just come from Kuwait and listed its destination as Houston, Texas. Iran's army said that it seized that oil tanker, which had a Marshall Islands flag on it, in the Gulf of Oman after it collided with an Iranian boat, injuring several crewmen. That is according to Iranian state media.
Yeah, it's always difficult reporting on these oil tankers, Jill, because there's the name of the ship, the company that owns the ship, who charters the ship, the flag that flies above the ship, and they're usually all different. In this case, this is a ship chartered by Chevron that was going from Kuwait to Houston. Either way, the Iranians took it, and allegedly it had 750,000 barrels of crude in it. This is now the 5th commercial vessel taken by Tehran in just the last 2 years. So far, the Iranians have released 2 of those tankers. That happened a couple months ago. And it does come as the Iranians claim there was a collision, and that's the reason why they took this ship. But this has been an escalation for a couple years now. This is in the aftermath of Trump pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. So as revenge, Iran has been seizing more of these oil tankers. And it's not just restricted to this. You have seen Iranian-backed militias carry out attacks on U.S. forces in Syria. That killed one U.S. contractor. Iranian forces have also been coordinating attacks against Israel. You've also seen Iranian attacks in Iraq on U.S. allies there and bases there. In response, the U.S. military has accelerated delivery of warplanes to the region, and it moved a nuclear submarine into the Red Sea. So you continue to see developments in the region, which is not atypical of the Middle East here, but we're keeping tabs just given the headline we saw on Thursday.
From The Hollywood Reporter, Jerry Springer, the former Cincinnati mayor who became America's most controversial talk show host, has died at the age of 79 from pancreatic cancer. NBC Universal, which produced and distributed The Jerry Springer Show, said in a statement, Jerry Springer was much more than a talk show host who redefined television. He was a savvy politician, pop cultural icon, and a devout and loyal friend who was most proud when he spoke up for the marginalized and unrepresented. Strangers would open up to him, and he loved nothing more than to give them a voice. The Jerry Springer Show debuted in 1991. It was taking aim at the Phil Donahue Show. In 1994, after struggling in the ratings, Springer and his producer took a leap in the dark. They decided to remake the show, turning away from such liberal themes like guns and homelessness and towards something altogether more tabloid. Almost overnight, Springer's program surged, and by 1998, it was even beating the Oprah Winfrey Show. The host's entrance was changed. He was now sliding down a stripper pole, and the theme of each show kind of played to the lowest common denominator with things like stripper wars and I want my man to stop watching porn. It was on for 27 seasons, eventually ending in 2018. Mosh, love him or hate him, for many people of our generation, this was must-see TV.
Jill, I can remember many days homesick from school where that was must-see TV. And I will say, having grown up in the Chicago suburbs, have fond memories a couple times of ditching afternoon classes, heading downtown, and being in the studio audience of the Jerry Springer Show. I seem to remember, I think both times I was there, it was like a DNA reveal. Like, who's your daddy? Are you the real daddy?
That's what I remember the most from the Jerry Springer Show. It felt like that was a very common theme.
Clearly rated well. I don't remember him coming down the stripper pole, but again, but if the Hollywood Reporter says it happened, Jill, I guess it happened. A bit of history on Jerry Springer. He was born in February of 1944 in a London subway station that was being used as a shelter during bombing raids during the Blitz. He was the son of a bank clerk and a shoe shop owner, two Jewish refugees who had fled Germany at the height of Nazi Germany and fled the Holocaust. He once said, if you're a child of Holocaust survivors, it's hard not to be a liberal. 27 members of my family were wiped out. You learn that you never judge people on what they are, but what they do. Before he was a TV host, he had political ambitions. At one point, he was actually the mayor of Cincinnati, but that was derailed by a prostitution scandal. If memory serves me right, he wrote a check to a prostitute that was discovered.
He survived that scandal. He was pretty open about it, and he became mayor of Cincinnati after the scandal. The scandal had forced him to resign from city council. Things I learned researching this podcast.
Oh, that's so interesting. I thought I always had a command for Jerry Springer, but thank you for going into 1970s Cincinnati history for us, Jill. There you go. He has the prostitution scandal, but still becomes the mayor of
Cincinnati.
And
his wife was actually the one who was like, don't let this derail your dreams. I'm not happy with you, but don't let it derail your dreams.
That's quite a couple over there. Fast forward 2016, I got to meet him at the 2016 Democratic Convention in Philadelphia. We had him as a guest on CBS, on the streaming outlet there. And I guess he was just at the convention because, he was into Democratic politics and he showed up. And one of the things we talked about, I remember, was it was the, Trump-Clinton race, how dirty politics had gotten. And he's like, people mock me and the guests I had on my show. But you can mock them. They're regular people. Like, they're not leading the country. Right. This has gotten out of control. We should have a different standard for our politics.
Fair point. As always, unfortunately happens, when somebody dies, you learn a lot about their lives. And he really did lead a fascinating one. And that is part of the reason that I love On This Day in History, that I love that segment. I feel like I'm learning about people who are still living or events that happened relatively recently and things that really affect us now.
And sometimes the first draft of history or the first impression you get of somebody doesn't give you the full picture, right?
Moshe, we do want to also mention that it is Infertility Awareness Week. It's something that so many people struggle with and still don't totally discuss openly. A few stats, Moshe. 1 in 8 couples struggle with infertility. About 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 pregnancies actually end in miscarriage. So if you do the math, that means many, many women have experienced a miscarriage. Candidly, I had a miscarriage before I got pregnant with my son. So anyway, we just wanted to give a little shout out to anyone out there who is struggling with this. You're not alone.
Not at all, and we're thinking about all of you. Here's another stat to keep in mind if you're dealing with infertility right now. 17 states right now are required to either cover or offer insurance coverage for an infertility diagnosis or treatment. Even if insurance coverage is available where you live, it's still important to contact your insurer and clarify what your out-of-pocket expenses can be. We're linking to a Today Show story about this in the show notes. All right, now time for your favorite segment, Joe, on this day in history, on this April 28th. 53 years ago, we'll start in 1970, President Nixon gave formal authorization to commit U.S. combat troops in cooperation with South Vietnam into sanctuaries in Cambodia, basically expand the war to another country. He initially did this secretly. Eventually, it was announced. It set off a wave of anti-war demonstrations, including the infamous one at Kent State on May 4th of that year, that resulted in the killing of 4 students by Army National Guard troops. The incursion angered many in Congress who felt Nixon was widening the war at that point. That actually resulted in a series of congressional resolutions trying to limit the authority of the president at that point. All right, a bit of literary history here. On this day in 1926, author Harper Lee, who would go on to win acclaim for her novel To Kill a Mockingbird, was born. All right, now to some music history. 20 years ago today, Apple officially launched the iTunes Store, which gave users this novel ability to purchase and download music from the internet directly to their iTunes library. Jill, we were just coming off the Napster era at that point. Kazaa, Napster, LimeWire. What were you using to illegally download your
Napster
music before iTunes?
That totally crashed my computer the day that I was supposed to hand in my thesis at Columbia. So word to the wise, do not download illegal music. It is not worth it.
Jill, that would have been great advice 20 years ago. I don't think that's a thing anymore. You're like,
all you kids out there, they're like, we don't even know what Napster is.
All you kids out there, stop downloading. They're like, dude, I stream on Spotify. Jill, what the hell are you talking about?
But it was a pivotal moment for music because it used to be that you'd have to buy an entire album. You could never buy just a song. And so Apple or somebody there said, a song was going to be, I think it was what, $1.29, or maybe it was $9. I think, it started at 99 cents. It eventually went up to a little bit over $1. But they basically said, okay, this is what we're going to value a song at. Previously, you had to go and purchase, as I said, an entire album, and it costs a lot more. And it changed the way we listen to music. It changed the way artists make music. And now we just have streaming, which has changed the game even further.
All right, staying with music here. 40 years ago today, Beat It by Michael Jackson reached #1 on the Billboard charts. One of his iconic hits, Jill, it also includes a guitar solo by Eddie Van Halen.
I did not know that. Interesting.
That guitar solo in the middle, I was about to sing it, but I can't really sing a guitar solo. I think they made us perform it in my 3rd grade camp. I think at the time my camp counselor was really into Michael Jackson, so we had to perform Beat It among other songs. Might have been the summer of 92.
Was it camp sanctioned, or was this just like a project from your counselor? It was like, I know what we could do at Raspberry.
It was a talent show. It was a talent show, and I think each group had to perform a song, and we had to do like a medley of Michael Jackson at the time. All right, and we'll end here with one other piece of musical history that I discussed at the top. This week in 1967, Aretha Franklin released her song, Respect, or at least her version of the song. It turns out that Respect was originally written and recorded by Otis Redding 2 years previous in 1965. She took the song, she flipped the song from a male perspective to a female's perspective. You know, it is an anthem, a woman's demand for respect. In Otis Redding's original version that he wrote of Respect, there was no spelling like R-E-S-P-E-C-T. That's Aretha. There were no backup singers. In the original version, it's Otis's song about a male-dominated relationship, basically show respect for your man. Franklin then takes Respect and says, no, it's about respect for women.
Which is obviously, I think, the much more powerful meaning of the song, which is why Aretha's version took off.
It's very interesting, though. Listen to the song again and imagine Otis Redding singing it, right? His version of it. But she made the song what it is, right?
It's an anthem about respecting the woman.
She added that Sakatumi. She added R-E-S-P-E-C-T, like the icon, like she, and it's interesting because if you look at a number of famous songs through history, another famous example is "I Will Always Love You," which was originally a Dolly Parton song, and then Whitney Houstonified it, right? "I Will Always Love You." Like now you think about her, but the original version is Dolly Parton. So there's a lot of cool musical history here, and I think the respect history is particularly poignant.
All right, Mosh, cheers to the freaking weekend. It is Friday, time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Kick it off.
All right, watching. I keep hearing a number of you have been sending me messages on Instagram being like, Mosh, I want your take of The Diplomat on Netflix. So I am making that part of my weekend viewing. I will check that out and let you guys know how I feel about it. I'm also reading that Disney Plus has Peter Pan and Wendy, a live action version of the whole Peter Pan story. That is out today on Disney Plus. And what's very cool about it, Jill, is they have cast a actor with Down syndrome in a major role for the first time in a Disney film. All right, Jill, what are you watching?
Mosh, I don't know if you're familiar with Paw Patrol. I'm sure one day you will be. There is a new Paw Patrol All Paws on Deck special. It actually came out on Monday, April 24th. There is an encore on Friday that is already being DVR'd at my house, and we all plan to watch it Friday night.
Between your warning not to download illegal music and your use of the phrase DVR, Jill, I feel like I'm living in 2008.
What do we call it? It's TiVoed? I use DVR. I DVR stuff on TV. Is that not what we call it anymore?
I think record. I think the kids just say record now. TiVo and DVR is antiquated.
Okay.
All right, Jill, what are you reading?
Okay, I'm back to my New York Times guest essays. There's one called Cliches to Avoid Like the Plague. It's titled Tip of the Iceberg. And Mosh, this is a good reminder for us news people who write scripts for a living. We need to do better. We just need to write words that explain what we mean. Believe it or not, when I was talking about this, I was going to say, we need to up our game, which is one of the cliches that they talk about, hence the point of the essay. So it's just this list of overused cliches in no particular order. It begins ramped up, amped up, ratchet up, gin up the ante, double down, jumpstart, behind the curve, swim against the tide, go south, go belly up, level the playing field, open the floodgates, think outside the box. I could go on. We use them all the time. I think we probably should, again, challenge ourselves to do better.
Actually, I think looking at your initial list there, I think we do pretty well. One that I hate and we just need to make sure never to use and definitely email us if we use it. I hate the term hot seat.
Yeah.
Whenever congressional hearings happen, they're like, blah, blah, blah's on the hot seat.
A grilling on the hot seat. And it's like, oy.
Okay. Yeah, grilling. We use grilling. We got to stop doing that too. Jill, I just completed a book and actually an interview with the author that'll be out next week for the premium listeners. It's Look For Me There by Luke Russert. You might recognize the name. He's the son of Tim Russert. He was an NBC correspondent for a number of years. I'm lucky to call him a friend as well. He left his job in 2016 and then traveled the world, 6 continents, 70 countries, to sort of find himself. And it's a really interesting journey. Just read that. And I think you guys will enjoy the interview.
Ooh, I can't wait. I was a huge Tim Russert fan. Who isn't? And I definitely will listen to that podcast and read the book as well. Mosh, what are you eating?
It's more like what I'm drinking right now, Jill, boba tea.
Ooh.
We're loving it. I may have mentioned it on the podcast before, but I'm going to use it again this week. There's a place around the corner in downtown Brooklyn called Debut Tea, and they have some really incredible boba. And so just loving it right now. How's the challah coming?
It was messy. It was stressful. But if the final product tastes good, that's all that matters. Right, Mosh?
Jill, you were baking a loaf of bread. What was happening in your kitchen? Why is the loaf of bread so stressful?
Well, I was doing it with my daughter. Okay, so that adds a whole level of complexity.
Wait, remind us how old is Alex?
So we did it together. It was a project with her school where the Hebrew teacher, where they send home the ingredients and everybody kind of does it over Zoom with one of the teachers leading the instruction. It actually was kind of comedic. She just kept going, Alex's mom, is everything okay over there? Alex's mom. And I'm lifting up very sticky dough. And apparently, I think I probably needed more flour. But we'll see if it tastes good. I haven't tried it yet. That is what I will be eating. And look, this is how you learn.
Jill, I look forward to the video. We're still waiting for your behind the scenes on the Mo News Team Instagram account. So I'm looking forward to some challah bread.
You got it. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Review us in the App Store so we can continue to grow.
A reminder to join Mo News Premium over at mo.news/premium. $7 a month, $70 a year, 2 free months if you do the annual package. And since you're a listener of the Mo News Podcast, a reminder there's a special code just going for a couple more days now, Mo News Pod, Mo News POD, for an extra month free. A reminder, we also have a voicemail. We got a couple today, Jill. We got to answer them on an upcoming show. 1-800-711-MOSH. Ask your question. I don't know, provide a comment, but mainly your questions on the news. We're looking to add more of them into an upcoming podcast, including special podcasts we're going to do just for premium listeners. And don't forget to follow us over on Instagram at Mosh, at MOSHEH.
All right, bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.